As an exporter exporting packaged product to Europe, the new packaging and packaging waste regulation is going to impact your business. Today, I'm just going to give you 5 steps to get started in making sure that you're going to be able to still export your product to Europe in the future. Here are the 5 steps. Firstly, understand the intent of the regulation. This is an evolving piece of legislation, and there will be standards updates and new harmonised standards and more information about how you're going to achieve the requirements in this regulation that will come through over time. But if you start with understanding the intent of the regulation, then you will be able to make a robust strategy that will ensure that you don't have to keep changing your product over time, that you can actually meet the requirements. Second, audit your current packaging against the regulation. You need to understand where you are today so that you know where you need to get to. Step 3, start a conversation with your packaging partners, so your suppliers, and your distribution and retail chain, and I will talk a bit more about that in a moment. Number 4, build a packaging strategy around your product needs and the regulatory requirements. There may need to be some changes to your products so that you can use new packaging options in order to meet the requirements. And the 5th, document everything as you go. Transparency is really important within this regulation, so make sure that you're documenting the things that you do. So what is the intent of this regulation? If I had to summarise it in 5 points. Firstly, minimise all packaging. Anything you can do to use less packaging is going to be in alignment with the intent of this regulation. Any packaging you do use, make it circular. It should be recyclable, reusable or compostable. Third, use post-consumer recycled plastics and other recycled materials where possible. I've underlined it because this is going to be the most challenging thing for New Zealand businesses. You may have to import post-consumer recycled plastic from Europe to be able to meet these requirements, and of course that has other impacts in terms of your environmental footprint and so forth. So something to start looking into early. The 4th is to remove hazardous substances from food contact materials, and the 5th is around creating transparency. So there's requirements around registration, technical documentation, declarations, labelling. So that's the transparency part of the regulation. Step 2, audit your current products. When you have a piece of legislation that has stepped dates of implementation like this one does, it's good to set up a bit of a matrix like this where you have your products or your packaging elements down one side and you have those dates and those requirements along the top there. Now what I've shown here only goes out to 2030, but there's a whole lot more requirements which carry on to 2040 and beyond. So you can see I have used a fictitious example of a tea bag exporter. They currently have a plastic tea bag which they put into a box which is covered in a plastic wrap, and then it is put into a carton and palletized. Now what this example or what this company has done is they've had a look at whether they're meeting the requirements currently or not. So they're already meeting the heavy metal limits because those have been in for a while. The next thing they need to look at, which is applicable only to the tea bag, is the PFAS content in their food contact material. They've put a question mark because they don't know whether they comply with this or not. They're going to have to do some research around that one. And then as we go on, we see a number of crosses. That means they know that they currently don't comply or haven't yet done this work, so they're going to need to turn those crosses into ticks. And then of course a lot of it is not applicable to different parts of the regulation. So this is how you get started on understanding where things are at currently. And by doing this, you can also think if you have particular products that you're going to be obsolete or that are going to become obsolete at a certain date, you're going to remove them from sales, then of course it means that anything after that date you're not going to be concerned about. So this gives you something that you can overlay with your current roadmap for your products and what's happening with your products. Step 3, involve your supply and distribution chain. You want to do this early. So your suppliers, you want to discuss options and alternatives with them, what documentation they currently have available that's going to support compliance, and you want to gauge their level of understanding of the regulation. You may need to change suppliers if they can't meet those requirements, so it's important to really start those conversations early. Your distributors and retailers, it's also important to start talking to those partners in Europe to understand their expectations around things like reuse and compostable alternatives, or any concerns or ideas they may have about packaging reduction initiatives that you might take, or product changes that you might make to support the changes in packaging. So it's important to have those conversations earlier. They may have very specific expectations. One example, if you are a beverage supplier and you're currently supplying all your beverage in recyclable products, your retailers are going to have to meet a requirement where 10% of the beverages they sell are in reusable containers, and so they may pass that expectation on to you. They may say that we're only going to purchase from you if you also give us the option for some of your range in reusable. So you need to understand all of those things really early. Step 4 is about building your strategy. And what's really important when you do this is to start with each piece of packaging you currently have and clearly define the purpose, so that you make sure your solution, whether it's a change to your packaging or a change to your product or a combination of changes to your packaging and your product, is still going to satisfy those requirements. So you can see here our tea bag manufacturer has defined each of the requirements of those different pieces of packaging. Packaging has many functions, for example, extending shelf life, protecting products during shipping, and you need to understand, or you need to define what each of those are, so that you make sure your solution is still going to achieve those outcomes. Example, our tea bag example, for their packaging solutions, they're looking at an option of a compostable tea bag. They're going to use recyclable cardboard for the carton. They're going to get rid of the plastic wrap altogether, and they're going to make the cardboard sealable so that they don't need the wrap for extending shelf life. And then recyclable cardboard and reusable wooden pallet. They are also looking at some changes to the product. For example, they can sell loose leaf tea and get rid of the tea bag altogether as an option. So they can explore both of those and figure out what's going to work for them in their distribution network. Our last step is about documenting the changes you make. It's really important to keep really good records, because you're going to need to defend the decisions, or you may need to defend the decisions you make if anybody questions whether you are meeting the requirements. So if you can show, and you can record this in your technical documentation, that you have actually successfully eliminated a lot of packaging and taken various actions to satisfy the intent of the regulation, that's going to put you in a much better position than if somebody pulls you up and you can't justify or explain the things that you've done, even though that you know that you have been taking action. So make sure you document everything really well. So those are your first 5 steps to get you started. There are going to be a number of challenges that you meet along the way, particularly for food contact materials, but for other packaging for other products as well. So what's really important is that you get started soon and you get that layout of where you currently are, where the gaps are, so that you can start working on those things. And if you get stuck or you want to talk strategy with somebody, feel free to get in contact.